Welcome. My name is Shaida, and this is Her America. Today's episode is going to be personal because I'm going to be sharing with you about my spiritual journey and where I am and what it is, what has been like for me for the past few months, especially these recent months, navigating this world as a woman of God, and including the church, because as you can see in the title of the episode, we're going to be discussing about church hurt and how it has affected people and how it has affected me personally, and why it is so important to bring issues that involve the church to light and address them, because I believe that if people were encouraged to share their stories about their pain and their suffering and not feel that they have to suffer alone, then that would just make a world of difference. And I think and I believe that God would want all of his children to have comfort in knowing that they are not alone. So let's get into it. Currently, I have decided to step back from my local Christian community. I've not officially left, but I am taking a break because there was a lot of pain and trauma that I was wrestling with that needed to be addressed, and I knew that I couldn't do it in that environment because I knew the people could not support me in the way that I needed to be supported. And what I mean by that is I needed to be in a place where I can be me and I can be allowed to channel whatever emotions that I'm feeling without feeling judged or questioned or feeling less than the other people around me. And one of the things that I've learned about suffering is that when you suffer, God feels that. He feels your suffering. He mourns with you, and he is there beside you, feeling that hurt. And I think over the years, as someone who wrestled with depression and other issues surrounding mental and emotional health, that it's such a big lie that people that we believe that we're alone in our suffering, when in fact we're not. And one of the things that I've learned that stood out for me in the Bible was in Psalms 34 verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. That alone tells me that I can take comfort in being in God's arm and crying, because I am somebody who is human, because I am a human that goes through a lot of things, and God sees that, and God sees my worthiness, and he sees me as his daughter, and he wants me to be able to take that moment and transform myself into being a woman that he is sculpting me to be. And another scripture, Matthew 11:28, it says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And sometimes during suffering, during grief or pain, sometimes you just need to rest. And going to God being able to go to God has allowed me to be able to rest and helping me to navigate what I need to do, and taking on the next steps of how I want to navigate my relationships in the church, or how I want to navigate my walk with God. So what is church hurt? What is that? Well, church hurt is a newer term that's been popping around in the Christian community. If on social media, especially TikTok and Instagram, you always see Christian influencers. I'm putting those in quotations. Christian influencers sharing about church hurt and how it affects people. And I did a little bit of research, and church hurt is more like a noun. It is defined as the emotional, spiritual, and physical harm caused by a church or Christ-like community to others. And that was by loveisburden.com. And it is referring to the pain, sadness, emotional scarring, or abuse experienced in a church-like setting. So some examples of church hurt could be when a leader of a church is manipulating their congregates to do something they are not comfortable with, or they believe because they have this power that they can able to force people to do what they please. Another example could be weaponizing the Bible to justify inflicting pain or control on others. Another example of church hurt could be rejecting somebody based on specific demographics, whether that be their race or their financial status, whether they're middle class or poor. That could be a whole number of things, discriminating against somebody. I wouldn't say discrimination, but it could be rejecting somebody because you feel that they're less than you. But of course, that could also be a part of discrimination. That discrimination, no discrimination, no. It's discrimination when you put people down based on the demographics they're a part of, and it's worse when it is in a church where you're supposed to be welcoming to everybody. And so, yes, learning about this newer definition, and I've been on social media listening to stories about how people have been hurt by the church that I've been a part of. Not the church specifically, but just the church community that I've been a part of. Okay, just to circle back, I've been part of my local non-denominational church community for the past 5 years. When I was graduating high school, I gave my life to Christ and got baptized into this community, and then went on to college, and things happened and moved forward with this Christian community. And the church that I've been attending to for the past year is part of a larger international organization of churches. So there are churches that are associated with us all over the world, and I just am a part of this local church community that is located here in Virginia, United States of America. There we go. So I've been on social media listening to stories of how people who have been hurt by the church, as in the larger community that's a little bit bigger than my local community, and how other churches have responded to incidents involving sexual assault and abuse, including child abuse. And it's just, I just cannot, I just cannot fathom how people can look at a situation like this and think that and stay silent on this. It's just I couldn't. If I knew a leader that was abusing his or her authority, I'll be the first. I would definitely do another episode. I would call their names out. I would vocalize how they abuse their authority. I'm not the one to stay quiet about certain things about it, especially knowing my past and dealing with child abuse from a young age. I just can't get behind anyone using their authority to abuse other people. In other words, when I was a teenager and was still in the foster care system, I was living with my aunt and uncle. I was also going through high school and was finishing up high school, and I was going through my biblical studies during that time. As a teenager, I wasn't always the most well behaved. I definitely stirred some trouble for my aunt and uncle when they took me in. There was one incident where I did something where I misbehaved, and when it came to disciplining me, there were two incidents where my uncle would put his hands on me. He would literally drag me on the floor or pull me by my t-shirt or my top, whatever I was wearing, and there would be scars left from how he would rough me up because I wasn't obeying. And when I brought this to the attention of the women who were studying with me, they were like, well, he was upset. He had anger towards something you did, and you were being disciplined. They kind of dismissed the part of the fact that I was being abused. Another incident where I felt hurt people was when I was living in a sister house while I was in the campus ministry in Maryland. There was a sister who would consistently I would try my best to get along with her, but we just didn't have the best relationship during my time in that sister house. But there was a time where she felt bold enough. We were having a disagreement on something, and she asked me if I could do something, and I just wouldn't because I didn't want to bother doing it. And she made it a point to threaten me with violence, or not like violence, but she made it a point to threaten me with physical harm, meaning that if I didn't comply with what she wanted, she would put her hands on me. And I wasn't okay with that. I wasn't okay with her with the way that she would speak to me, and using her words to make threats towards me. And this is a sister. And so looking back at those memories and thinking of ways of how in the church, how I've had conflicts with other sisters, or just other people in general. Church hurt doesn't always have to look like a big group of people going against one person. It can be even on a individual scale. It could be just two brothers or just one brother who is being physically or spiritually or emotionally threatened by another brother, or a sister who's being who's being manipulated by a fellow sister who happens to be a leader in the church. And it doesn't always have to be this idea that this one big Christian community is always holding down this one person. It can also happen on a more individual scale. And then there were always I remember there was this one incident, or this one time, where I was living with a married couple in the church. When I first came down to Virginia, I stayed with this couple in the church who I still talk to. And one of the things that that the sister, I guess I could say she's my older sister, she made it a point to say, well, since I was also trying to find, I'm sorry if I just rumbling so much. I was finding a job. I was trying to look for a job at this point, and she was saying something like, there's no point in trying to find a job that can work with your church schedule if you're not going to bother living like a Christian. And that really broke me, because there were times where people would question my salvation and my worthiness as a Christian, because I wouldn't show up to a couple services, or I wouldn't I would lay back. And I think now that after being part of this community, after surpassing 5 years as a disciple and my journey with God, I know better than just to be manipulated. I know better than just believe the false pretenses of what it means to be a good Christian. So, how does one recover from being hurt, from being church hurt? Well, one of the things that I say is pray. You pray to God. You take all that anger and all that trauma and all that suffering, and you give it to Him. And you let God keep renewing your heart. And this is something that's going to have to be practiced consistently. I'm still praying to God about some of the things that I'm still working through that happened a year ago, 2 years ago. And sometimes that would mean talking, maybe even communicating to the people that hurt you. Another thing is maybe keeping scriptures. Keep a few scriptures in your heart, whether you have to write them out in a journal or just put them on a sticky note. Scriptures to help you, remind you of your relationship with God. It doesn't have to be something cliche. It can be something random out of the Bible that just reminds you that God is with you, that God doesn't see you as another disciple or a member of this XYZ church. You're Shaida. You're the daughter of God. God sees you as that, not anything else. And one thing that I've done that worked for me in the past is write a letter. Even if you have no intention of sending the letter to the person who hurt you, write a letter to the person who hurt you. It could be something that you can keep between you and God, but choose to write that letter. Let that person know how you felt, write everything, how it made you feel, everything that person did to you, write it out. And if you choose to send it out or not, that's totally up to you. But one thing that worked for me is being able to write a letter to that person. Another thing is talk to someone you trust. That could be in or outside the church. Right now, for me personally, I would probably pick somebody who was in the church but isn't close enough to the situation that I'm currently going through. So yes, I have been communicating with a few sisters and a few brothers, but right now, it's kind of, I'm just going solo at it at this point, and I'm trying to keep myself, I'm always constantly remind myself that I am still worthy of God, that God sees me as his daughter. And I do believe that as a woman of faith, that being a part of a community, a Christian community, a healthy one, is good for nurturing your relationship with God. And I know that I'm going to be there one day. I just know that right now I need to address some of the trauma that has been going on for the past few months. Some of the trauma that even the pain that's been lurking for the past few years. And know that if this is a church that I want to continue being a part of, or do I want to move elsewhere? And so with that being said, I wanted to go over 5 things that I have learned as I have grown in my discipleship journey with God. 5 things to celebrate 5 years of being a Christian. As you know, I became a Christian back in 2018, May of 2018. So this past May, I became a Christian. I celebrated my 5th year anniversary, or how in my church community they say birthday. That means spiritual birthday, the day that you were reborn. And one of the 5 things I've learned, first thing is guarding you. I wrote that down in my journal as guarding you, meaning I will lose people in my life because they have or will cause me trouble, and God is guarding me from those destruction and more needless pain. There are going to be times in your life that people are going to walk away from you, or you're going to walk away from people, not because trouble happens, and more importantly, because God is protecting you from whatever pain and destruction could follow with a friendship or carrying over a relationship like that into your life. The second thing I've learned is renewing of your mind. Always be protective of not only what you watch or what you listen to, but be careful about who influences you, whether that be in the church or in the world. Yes, of course, I've learned as a Christian woman, that the world is filled with filthy influences that will not only rotten your mind, but rotten your soul. But you also have to be careful with the influences, with the people in the church that you allow to influence you. Because if you're in a cycle of abusive leadership or control, or just in an environment where there's no structure, where there's always structure and there's no freedom to be an individual, that can definitely set you up for failure. So it's more important to be Christ-like rather than church-like. That's where I was going with that. Number 3, live more sober. And what I mean by this is engage in activities that will keep you in good spirits, whether that be exercising, taking on new hobbies, exploring, traveling, and by that, always say goodbye to bad habits. One of the things that I've been doing more of is how to add more nutrients in my diet. I've never been in this past year. I've never been more self cautious about what I eat until this past year, mainly because back in early 2022, I received a health scare that really whipped me up into shape. So I decided to be a little bit more cautious about what I eat, and I decided to exercise a bit more, and I've seen how that has changed how my health, not just physically but mentally too. I've seen how that has a great impact on my mental health when I change my diet and I feed my body good nutrients. Number 4, freedom. There is freedom in living for God. Do not allow others to dictate what your relationship should look like or what it means to be a good Christian. Of course, there are going to be times where there are going to be some structure, but when you die and you're standing before God, God is not going to ask you, why weren't you a member of this X, Y, and Z church? Or why didn't you attend church services every single Sunday? But it is going to ask you, what did you do to be a fisherman, to be a fisherman of the kingdom? What did you do? How did you become a good salt for the earth? How did you mirror what it's like to be a good shepherd? You know, it's important to be prevalent in the church, but it's also very important to be prevalent in your life. And what I mean by that is be a Christian that God sees you to be. Be that daughter or son that God wants you to be. Don't be the son or daughter that your parents want you to be in front of God. Don't be the son or daughter that your leader or your church discipler wants you to be. Just be the son or daughter that God wants you to be. And lastly, what I wrote is provoke good thoughts. And what I mean by that is never stay silent on issues you care about, and always bring God into conversations, because what I've learned, especially through my recent studies of what it's like of how to be a winner in front of God, God cares about the things you're going through. And if you are passionate about issues in the world that affect you, affect the church, affects your life, your family, don't be afraid to go to God and ask God to show you ways and how to navigate those issues, and bring him along as far as the conversation. That's actually one thing I'm trying to get better at doing myself, is how to bring God into the conversation more. Well, that's all I got to say today. It's been wonderful being able to share what I've been going through as far as my spiritual journey, and I hope you all just got a good insight into what I'm like As as a Christian woman and as a fierce fighter for truth, I hope that you guys have a great day. And this is Her America.